Hello and welcome to the Leaders in Supply Chain podcast. I'm your host, Radu Palamariu, Global Logistics and Supply Chain Practice Head for Morgan Phillips Executive Search. My job is to connect you with global experts, thought leaders and executives in all things supply chain. And this is episode 8, and it is my pleasure to have as guest Matthias Heutger. He is the Senior Vice President, Strategy, Marketing and Innovation at DHL. In his role, he leads the Commercial Development and Innovation area of DHL cross-divisional unit called the CSI, Customer Solutions and Innovation. And he drives the development of sector strategies for DHL across 5 focus sectors: automotive, energy, engineering and manufacturing, life sciences and healthcare, and technology. In addition, he also leads marketing and sales, steering and development for DHL's top 100 accounts, next to the customer-centric innovation activities across the DHL divisions. Also part of his customer-centric innovation approach, Matthias is coordinating closely the activity of the 2 DHL Innovation Centers in Germany and in Singapore, which does mean that they get to experiment with the latest technologies available. Moreover, Matthias' team is also responsible for the Logistics Trend Radar, which is one of the most well-documented and informative papers in the industry on the latest trends and technologies. He is also member of the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals and is highly engaged with our industry bodies and best practices associations like SAMA and others, as well as member of the Supervisory Board of GS1 Germany. Matthias, welcome, and it is a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you, Radu.
Super. So let's deep dive into some of the industry questions that I prepared for you today. And since you're very close to technologies and newest technologies, let me ask you, what technology trend in logistics do you think is likely to make the most impact by 2020?
That's probably the key question, I guess. So I think, as you know, we publish our trend radar on a regular basis to actually try to get an answer to that question. And so we look at a lot of trends on the technology side. My personal belief is right now, biggest impact is having robotics and automation, driven by all the advancement in sensor technologies, computing technology, but also related to that, everything around Internet of Things and data analytics, which I think for me is kind of always has to be looked at jointly. So those two, I believe, are probably the ones that will have the biggest impact in the short run, as we see already right now progressing. Looking ahead, there are probably others coming up. I mean, everybody talks about blockchain these days, which I think there's still a lot to learn about. Actually, how can we apply blockchain in logistics? Because it's a bit different than in a financial institutions, because you have a physical and a digital world. You need to figure out how you marry those two and then take advantage of blockchain, which I think is something that we also will kind of looking into. So what does it mean? Because everybody talks about it, so we need to be able to have an opinion on it. But also I think as the next iteration of analytics, I think it's really everything around cognitive computing and artificial intelligence, which we see as a lot of advancements, I would say, outside logistics. When you think about the Amazons, Googles of this world, who are trying to use the data now in a more intelligent way in order to predict certain things and also predict certain behaviors. And I think there's a lot to do when it comes particularly on improving the customer experience by using artificial intelligence. But that is also, I think, those two, that's why blockchain and artificial intelligence are the two focus topics we will kind of publish a report on later this year or early next year.
Mm. Super. I mean, I think blockchain and artificial intelligence are probably the most used buzzwords today.
Yeah. Yes.
But getting into the more pragmatic side, which indeed for now, let's say that the applications of blockchain and artificial intelligence are still developing. So you did mention about automation and robotics. Actually, you have recently written an article, I think, on LinkedIn that was quite well liked and shared and published further about the warehouse of the future. And DHL is testing a lot about robotics and how they can be used in a warehouse. So very practically, how do you see this being more and more implemented? Any good case studies to share from your clients?
Yeah, so I think what we saw, as I said, if you look at traditionally how much more than 80% of the warehouses globally are still manual, completely manual. And only 5% are truly automated, which was mostly due to the fact that it was in the past very inflexible and relatively expensive to automate. And as you, in logistics, particularly if you talk about fulfillment, you need to have a certain flexibility if product changes, if sizes changes, if you have certain activities going on, that you need to have a certain flexibility that cater for the customer requirements and customer needs. So that's why automation only worked in very fast moving environments with very standardized products. Which which particularly now with e-commerce and fulfillment is not the case anymore. It's all like small batches, small picks, so you have to be very flexible. But now with new technologies as that coming up and what we call like collaborative robots, it's different because in that case it's not either automated or manual. Now it's kind of you can complement the human work with robotics technology. So we have been testing quite successfully like collaborative piece picking and co-packing with like for example robots like Sawyer and Baxter from Rethink Robotics very successfully. So that is something that we are already rolling out in a quite a number of sites now as a support for co-packing activities. The next iteration for me is now, and when they talk about picking, is really like self-driving robots that assist in order picking, and there are different ways. So either it's like a robot that goes into the different alleys, like we work with companies like Fetch Robotics, Locos Robotics, to see how can we reduce, for example, increase efficiency, but also reduce the kilometers that people have to work, which kind of put strain on them as well. So we are testing some robots. And I think the first test we had was, I think the robot did about 30 kilometers a day in the warehouse, which is normally people have to walk. So there's a lot in terms of making the life easier for the employees, but also being able to cope with the additional volumes that we're expecting, particularly from e-commerce businesses. Plus, it also generates some efficiency gains for the supply chain as well.
Yeah, no, super. I mean, very good utilization, and indeed, I mean, you do have to walk a lot in the warehouse, and if that can be improved and saved time on that, I think.
Yeah, and the next thing we're kind of looking into is what we call this, and I think that's what I put in my article as well, the mobile piece picking. When you think about the next thing is really, right now you have a self-driving robot, and you have a picker who puts the pieces from the shelf into the cage of the robot. The big challenge is really can robots be able to pick themselves, which is much harder because I was simulating the human hand is probably the most complex thing to do, particularly when you have different shapes, different weights, different textures of products. So that's what is also part of our this year's like innovation challenge on robotics that we put on the market, to find kind of our startups, institutions, academics to come forward with ideas. So how can we do that? Because that would be for me the next iteration in order to support the picking process, to have that part of the process supported as well.
Yeah.
Which so far it's possible, but it's either too slow or it just doesn't. It only works with a very few or very specific type of products, shapes.
Yeah. And again, you need big volumes, which is not.
But the speed of the development is amazing, and the number of startups you see in that space and entering in there is quite encouraging too.
No, super. And let's talk a little bit about 3D printing, because I think that's another area where has some potential to disrupt segments of supply chain as well. What do you think about that? Any case studies, anything you've done around that as well?
I think it's an interesting topic. So we did publish something on that just recently, and we did something again a few years back already. And I think there's a bit of a controversial discussion. And I think that everybody thought this will completely disrupt logistics, which I don't believe it will. So I think it has the potential to disrupt certain supply chain of certain industries. Really, if you think about aviation, aerospace, there's a lot of spare parts. But logistics as such, I don't see that, because at least not right now. In the next 3 to 5 years, neither. I think there will be some parts, like if there's spare parts, certainly, that will have a big impact and a lot of advantages. And there also the role of logistics providers like DHL could change from shipping around the spare parts, but rather facilitating the spare parts supply chain by either hosting the 3D printers and kind of print on demand and then just ship the last mile. I think that is probably changing on spare parts, and particularly high value parts that are not that fast moving. But most of the standard mass produced items are still much more efficient to be produced in a traditional way, and they still have to be transported. So I think that is changing in some parts of the supply chain. You see it in some industries and subsectors, but it will not have that massive immediate impact on logistics, I think, as some people maybe predicted a few years back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it isn't technology we are looking into and we are experimenting with, because it will have an impact in certain parts of our business, and it will probably have a bigger impact at some point. But I think it's still
more in
way
the
to
future
go.
than the immediate. And if we had to I'll jump a little bit back to the artificial intelligence question, because it is more and more of a hot topic, and I think you have partnerships with Rethink Robotics, and I think they're using it for their collaborative robots. IBM, obviously, they have Watson. There's been some initial case studies, I think, in the supply chain of Siemens, as far as I saw, and Danone.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing at DHL.
I mean, as I said, it's also the question, where does artificial intelligence start? How does it relate to machine learning and analytics? So I think what we see, there's a lot, I think, where we can do in predictive analytics, which then for me, the more advanced version would be artificial intelligence if you build a model. But for example, some of the challenges we typically see with our customers is how can I better predict demand? So if I think about a certain market, and in order to be able to optimize my inventory, optimize my supply chain, the better I know, like if you think about car spare parts, for example, if I have all the data that I can get my hands on, I can probably predict in certain areas, because the roads are worse than elsewhere, I need more bumpers or more spare parts for bumpers than I use in other areas. So there's a lot of data I can bring in. But that's one part where I think we look into in predictive analytics and machine learning to build models that help us to help our customers in optimizing their demand and subsequently the supply chain. Also, what we see is in if you think about like our air freight business, if I would be able to better predict certain delays in shipments because of certain data that is related to shipping volumes, congestions at airports, weather and other things, again, it would help me to better manage my supply chain and pre-alert or maybe put on different routings, alternative routings to make sure certain critical parts or shipments make it in time. Okay. This is kind of practical things we're kind of looking into. I think the next thing for me is also in artificial intelligence is when it becomes to customer experience and shopping. So can I better predict where and what customers will shop where, so I can better predict my volumes? But also one thing we're looking into is dynamic routing. So if you think about it, today we have multiple, even DHL, we have multiple delivery routes planned in the morning. But then if certain volumes come up, what if you would be able to do a real-time reallocation? And even maybe having certain vends meet and exchange parcels in order to optimize routing or pick it up elsewhere, which is a relatively complicated algorithm to develop. But that's something we're also kind of looking into. Can we actually create something like dynamic routing to optimize customer experience and also the utilization of the network?
Mm-hmm. No, but that would be fantastic indeed. I mean, and it also, I think, again, coming back to the point where artificial intelligence for now is a big buzzword, actually, because it also, I mean, people are struggling and are trying to make sense in how do we actually use it. Yeah. And a key point to artificial intelligence is data. I mean, is your data...
Exactly. That's why I think the first step is always, and that's why we see everybody talks about it, but everybody realizes the first step is to get good data.
Yeah.
Which is particularly in logistics is a big challenge, because it is still traditionally a very paper-based business in many cases. Think about customs and other kind of paperwork that goes along. So that's why many companies are working on first to digitalize that flow of information, because that would be the requirement to do anything intelligent with the data.
And real time. Yeah. I mean, it's two things that go hand in hand. And you've written also about the sharing economy, like obviously everybody talks about Uber, Airbnb type of models, because they changed basically fundamentally the way we operate as a society. There is a challenge also existing in logistics that the industry is or tends to be asset heavy, and key to profitability is also how much do you use your assets and increasing that asset utilization. Do you see a potential for this kind of sharing platforms in a way to be used in logistics?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, it's also one of I think the next article actually I'm about to publish on LinkedIn is also about that exact topic, because I believe that we published a report about it just recently. It's just a question more like how I think it's more a question. It's not if, but like how far and how fast it is going to go. Because there are multiple applications you can think about. One would really be the obvious one is warehousing space. So how can you really truly share warehousing? which again is more, it becomes back to what I said earlier, it's all about data. So if I have visibility about my capacity and empty space across the globe, then it's relatively easy to put it on a platform and see how we do that. In the past, it was always typically warehousing was always fixed space for fixed time period, which for many of the smaller businesses doesn't really work. So I think that's why having a more flexible warehouse space, and we're currently experimenting with it as well, which I think is one way of sharing that more flexibly. But also, if you think, I think there are already startups out there looking into how can we actually use the space within cities better as well. Some people who live downtown, like, I don't know, if you think about the metropolitan area like Singapore, New York, or others, you don't have a lot of space in your apartment because it's very expensive, right?
Small, yeah.
So you need to have some space to store. But there might be other people who live maybe elsewhere or maybe in offices actually, or also in a little bit some areas that have space that they could rent out. It's more like matching those two, very similar to what Uber does with drivers in demand for a taxi ride. You could do the same with warehousing. And all I think is like, startups, like I think one is Makespace, Omni. So there are a couple of them already out there that try to match those residents in order to use that space that is available better and help those who don't have the space. And I think you can easily kind of see how that would work for business in the same way. Delivery, even what we said about earlier, like small, like spare parts and some other things where you don't need massive warehouses, but you need small warehouses for a certain period of time.
Yeah, it's more about the network than it is about
the other thing you said, I think, yeah, exactly. It's also, I think, assets. And it's not just logistics, but it's also, I think, if you think about construction, which is already happening to some extent. I mean, I think in agriculture, we have seen it already, that there are a lot of this farmers sharing the assets, right? The tractors and everything else, because it's so expensive equipment that is idle most of the time if they don't need it. Construction is similar. And I think you can also think about how can you better utilize the assets in terms of trucks and vans when they're not used, right? During whatever nights or during days. So in many cases, we have tours during the night, but then the stuff is idle during the day.
Yeah. So
how can you better utilize that by sharing with other parties in the ecosystem?
Yeah. I think there is also, I don't know if you heard about this startup called Flexe in the US. I think they're doing for the warehousing piece. They're trying to be like sharing,
like the Airbnb for warehousing.
Kind of.
Yeah, there are a few out there. And I think we will see more and more of that. It's not huge yet, but I think it will increase.
Yeah.
And the other thing in which I think is common now, it's more like it's transport capacity. I mean, we started our own platform with Saludo, which is also like nothing else in the marketplace to match capacity in terms of road freight. Which again, I think that will be what I said, like I think earlier, that will be a major disruption in the industry when it comes to also forwarding. How can we better match demand and supply in terms of capacity, which again, artificial intelligence and all the stuff we talked about before is an enabler for that you are able to really properly match and automate that matching, which has been tried already in the past. And I think a boundary was also, if it comes to international transportation, like customs and other regulations and paperwork. So again, there's a lot of work still to be done, but there's a lot of potential in doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the trend is clear. I think digitalization is happening across the board, across all industries. I think if in any industry you're not thinking about that as one of the chief executive officers, you're wrong. Actually, you're missing the boat. And I think it's going to happen. It's just as you said, it takes time, and then all these different pieces of the puzzle will come together.
And I think a lot is also acceptance. So I mean, is a lot of change management. I think is required too, because I mean. It's like with Airbnb, right? At some point, people feel. I mean, you have to feel comfortable with letting strangers in your home. I mean, I guess the boundary with the warehouse is maybe a bit lower, but it's still you have to have that confidence that whoever is doing that matching, right, make sure that they all behave well and it's kind of working and people are being paid and everything else. So I think there's a lot of that as well in terms of the acceptance of that new model. Which Airbnb, they managed quite well, but I think they had to do a few things to also support it. And I think that is something we still have to figure out, how can we create that acceptance in the market as well for some of the other assets.
Yeah, I mean, mindset typically is mindset change typically is one of the hardest changes. I mean, technology is an enabler, but mindset or people's mindset can take longer to change. And since we're at that topic, and actually I think it's linked to our next question, is what do you see as some of the biggest challenges that logistics companies in general, DHL in particular, is being faced right now with implementing all these new technologies that are coming through? If you have any specifics.
Yeah, I think what you said, I think we when we looked at it and said, can everybody talks about Industry 4.0 in Germany or I think different names in different areas, but I think it's all about particularly traditional industries, but like companies like us, like GE, like Siemens, like big multinational companies who traditionally are already around quite a while and have very diverse businesses. Like this whole digitalization topic is a big challenge. So how do we make sure that we are ready for that, and how do we support our customers on their journey for digitalization? How do we do it ourselves? Because I think some of the newer companies, they have a slight advantage because they started off as digital, where in our case we have to transform towards becoming truly digital. And as you said, I think it's not necessarily just about, there's a bit of technology and data, but the majority is about change management and mindset, to really make sure people embrace that change and don't see it as a threat to them. Like I said, with robotics, I mean, there's always this debate, is it a threat to the employees or not? Actually, what we found quite interesting is when those sites where we deployed some of the Sawyers, and people loved it. They thought, wow, because I mean, they're quite cute with their face and everything else. People started taking selfies with them. But they also felt, hey, we're really working for an innovative company, which actually gave them more security for their job than working for a company who doesn't embrace change. I think it's all about that kind of making people understand that actually this kind of also enhanced technologies, it's all about productivity gains, of course, but typically always productivity gains came with more wealth for people as well as more jobs. So that's why I think it's like this whole making people embracing the change is probably the biggest challenge for any company as well as for ours. Besides, I think some of the, I would say, the more homework we have to do in terms of fragmented IT landscapes that typically like companies have that have been grown over years and data. But I think the biggest thing for me is really the change in the mindset.
Yeah, and good points that you've shared. And I think maybe it's also there's a problem because I mean if you open media and social channels these days, you always see automation. Will robots take your job? So it's always in that negative framework of robots are coming after your job. Are you ready? And it's not exactly like that. I mean, as you rightfully said, it's more about robots doing the boring part of your job because typically it's the repetitive part of it, and then helping you to do the more creative part, and also enabling you to do more.
And I think we shouldn't neglect that there might be a change of job profiles, right? Like when you have the first industrial revolution, the same thing. I mean, the job profiles might change, so there might be different type of jobs that are increasing. But like everybody, when computers came along, so everybody was kind of scared. Probably most people work in IT. So I think it opens up new opportunities at the same and typically at a higher rate than it's changed as traditional jobs. So but it's changed at the end.
Mm-hmm. And if you this is a question more in terms of if you were an investor, what type of technology startup would you invest in? Which technology do you think will bring the most? It's kind of coming back to the first question, but where would you bet your money on?
I think I would bet it on robotics and artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Combination of the two.
Yeah, or maybe one each. It depends. I mean, again, you need to find the right one.
Yeah,
but I think there are some really. I mean, robotics. I think it's something that I'm sure will come. Just the question, which company will make the race or which technology exactly. But I think is one area where I think I would watch, and I think also artificial intelligence because there's so much potential there. And there's a lot of startups as well, so you need to pick the right one. But I would say those two are probably the ones that I think are probably. So if you have to pick two, I would pick those two areas.
Yeah. Thank you. And And moving to the people segment, because we are in headhunting ourselves, and we do need people, and artificial intelligence, robots, and all of that aside, we will still need very good people. So as the leader of the DHL innovation team, obviously you're at the forefront of developing new technologies, all done through people, of course. So in terms of finding the right skills to take DHL to the next level, where do you feel there is a skills gap at the moment? What's hardest for you to find?
Yeah, I think I mean, not anymore, I think, but I mean, a few years back, the hardest was really because, I mean, the logistics wasn't known as the most innovative and most exciting industry compared to others, right? So, so really getting the right, particularly here, so we have a relatively young team that needs to, and I think the key here for us is we need to be able to match this new technology. So you have people there maybe artificial intelligence as well, but they have no clue about logistics. So you have to be able to reflect. So how could I deploy this technology in the logistics processes and environment? I think that's the key thing, to have both. That's why in our case, and it's hard to find both, to be honest. But I think what we try to do is to have teams set up that we have both skills in there in different people. So we hiring people from the market who really bring this, I would say, technology knowledge and a bit maybe younger and kind of really knowledgeable in some of the technologies, like they're mentioning artificial intelligence and things like that. But then kind of have them work together with people in our operations. That's why we call this like our customer-centric innovation approach, to really bring that together and test it in a live environment, because you always need both. You need to be able to figure out, okay, we have a technology like robotics here, but how could I deploy it in the logistics environment? And so to have those two together, I think that's probably the most critical one. Typically, it was very, as I said, because we were in the most sexy industry in the past, it was really hard to get that talent from the outside, because they were much more interested in I don't know, joining companies in Silicon Valley or elsewhere. So I think that's why when we started doing this whole logistics trend radar and also creating more, positioning ourselves as a thought leader in the industry, that helped a lot to gain also some attention from those talents. So it's getting better now. It's still probably harder for us than for Google or for other companies to get that talent. But we see that with the perception the market is changing, it's also easier to get the talent. But still, we're still looking for more talent. So everybody out there.
Mm. And it's also about the quality of the quality, as well as just the sheer presence of stories around interesting innovations and technologies and stuff in general, case studies in general. And I think e-commerce has also helped to transform that and getting more people aware.
Yes.
Of logistics, and the heart of e-commerce actually is logistics. 90% of it is logistics, 10% is the marketing. And I think it's slowly transforming also the perception of people that it's an interesting place to go. And also, I mean, the reality is that there is, in a funny way, some sort of ironic way, there is a shortage of supply chain talent worldwide. We see this. We see this in Asia. I think there is also a gap in Europe, North America. Now, there is always this debate also in terms of, should companies try to develop their in-house talent? Is there some education changes that need to be done, maybe at the university level, or how do we address this supply chain?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we have to. I mean, we have 500,000 employees, so we need to make sure that not just we hire a few new people, but we have to make sure that those 500 are actually trained to the latest standards and everything else. That's why I think a few years back we created a certified program where we train people on certain elements that we feel are important. Like, it's either depending on which area they're working in, so they all go through very intensive training, which is as much content as it is mindset training on understanding what do customers need, what is a good customer experience, and how do we deliver that customer experience to them. And also then add on new functionalities like what we do here. Like, for example, we have one of those trainings. We try to do it always at the Innovation Center as well. So we expose people to the new technologies and the new developments as well. Now, so we have a very extensive internal certified training program across all the divisions that will help us to make sure that the people kind of stay on top of all the new things that are happening. and still deliver that customer experience that we want them to deliver. But I think we have to combine it with also bringing in some talents from the outside and have that healthy mix of both.
Yeah. And in terms of, you did speak about mindset and training, addressing both the skills as well as the mindset, which is crucial. What do you see, or what do you think is the critical mindset that people in logistics, and maybe specifically CEOs in logistics companies, should have in order to lead companies to success in coming years?
I think it's I think it's changing, or it has been changing. I think in the past, probably if we were thinking about senior logistics people, most of them, the key skill was either engineering or logistics experience, which is still critical to have it in our business because we have to run networks, we have to run operations. But I think increasingly more important becomes this whole ability to change and embrace the change and also lead your people through that change process, which probably becomes more critical than the pure technical skill. At least that's my belief. So I think that you need to understand the business, of course, but critical really will be to guide through that change and make sure you don't lose the people by doing that.
Yeah. And also I think what we've observed that fundamentally has changed or shifted in the industry, that there's more and more, and especially with the startups, there's actually more and more people coming from consulting. The McKinseys of the world are stepping into different startups and logistics. There's finance people that are also coming in. And back to the point where if they marry or if they manage to have a team with strong logisticians that really understand how the networks and design and everything works on the ground level, they tend to make very good combinations.
Yes.
And it's the best combinations. And then they move things forward. So very interesting to see what will happen next. Moving to the final segment of the podcast, about a little bit about your personal sharing. What's the best piece of advice that you've received through your career? Obviously, you're in a senior position in DHL. You've done well for yourself, but what's something that you think mattered a lot for you at the initial stage of your career? That's one advice.
I think initial stage, it's really, pick an area where you can learn a lot. So I think I started in consulting as well, like in our DHL consulting unit, which I think was where you experience a lot of different projects in different areas. So I think it's important to have a relatively broad experience across different topics, across different geographies as well. But I think also, I wasn't very fixed on, I want to be here in 5 years. It just happened. So I think if you kind of work that and you work on the right topics, but I think it's also important to develop the right relationships with people you can help in your career. Actually, it's maybe as critical as delivering on your objectives. And I think stay cool on your career just happens if you do that. So I think some people that really have that, I want to be exactly like this, and they put themselves under a lot of pressure, which I don't think is needed.
Yeah. Typically things do fall into place and flow, sort of. Yeah. If you follow a certain principle, I think it's important to have a certain network, and I think it's important to work with the right people. Of course, it's important you have to deliver results, and that's kind of a hygiene factor, so to say. You have to do that, but I think if you say open and flexible, I think that for me was quite critical. Yeah, and I just want to make this point because I think a lot of people need to hear it as well, and it is the combination of the two. So definitely you cannot do it without results, but definitely also you cannot do it without network.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people in general kind of miss the networking part, which is extremely important as well, because you need to be visible and you need to get your work seen by other people. That's the matter. Can you also share with us any kind of supply chain resources, anything that you use to to get your information to keep yourself up to date?
The only thing you really need, of course, is our logistics trend radar, right? Everything is in there. Seriously, I think that is a good publication, but I think then, I'm not using the one publication, and I don't want to kind of stress one. The multiples. You can use Harvard Business Review. They have sometimes really good articles, but also just certain company website is worthwhile exploring, particularly if you have like looking at startups. But I'm more try again. I'm reading a little bit in it, but not too much, because I really try also to experience and talk to the people. So we have a lot of interaction with startups and other companies to really talk to them and figure out what they really do. I mean, you can read it, but you need to meet the people to really understand what is truly going on.
Yeah. Again, the networking element to it, and I mean, keeping. And I think it's great that at the DHL Innovation Centers you do organize a lot of events, and you're very actively plugged into the communities, because that's where the ideas flourish and kind of come up. Final question from me. So if you could give just one advice to a 23-year-old or 22-year-old, I don't know what time they graduate in Germany, graduating university and wanting to achieve a great career in supply chain, what would it be?
I mean, I think it's probably more exciting than it ever was, but it's a question. I mean, supply chain is a very broad term, so I think it could be in production, it could be in logistics. But if you think about more like logistics and supply chain management, I think then either I guess what I said earlier, pick something where you have a broad learning experience at the beginning, so not settle in on that one role right away, but like, I mean, consulting is one option. Or I mean, many companies like ours have good like trainee programs where you can experience multiple functions before you have to settle in on one. Or again, if you could also, I mean, a lot of startups these days as well working in logistics. That's another route to go in and think about how can we disrupt the logistics industry or come up with an additional service, leveraging all what's out there and what I said earlier. Of course, I mean, join our innovation team. Because I mean, it's kind of I think that's a nice mix of you doing some cool projects and technologies, but it's still very close to the operations. I just wouldn't settle too fast on that. I want to have that one fixed role, but rather find something that is a bit broader. It gives you a broader learning experience
and more exposure to get a sense of different things and pick what best fits.
Yeah.
Super. Well, Matthias, thank you very much for your time today. Thank you for the sharing.
Thanks for having me.
For the case studies that you presented, as well as for the good stories. And we'll catch you soon. Good luck with and look forward to the next DHL Radar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to our podcast. If you liked what you heard, be sure to follow us on radopalamario.com/podcast for all the show notes, links, and extra tips covered in the interview. Make sure also to subscribe to our emailing list to get the news in the nick of time. If you're listening through a streaming platform like iTunes or Stitcher and you like what we do, please kindly review and give us 5 stars so we can keep the energy flowing and get more people to find out about our podcast. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so do feel free to follow me to stay tuned for our latest articles as well as future guests for the podcast. And if you have any suggestions or any other idea, please feel free to write to me. I respond to all. And also, please make sure not to miss our next episode, where we will be having a few other C-level and top leaders in supply chain joining us. Stay tuned.